I've been shooting video professionally since 2008, and since then I've used a wide variety of technologies and gear, some I liked, some less, but lenses have always been a weak point. For most of my career, they were hard to come by here in the northern part of Italy, where I live, and although I would have loved to use Arris and Cooks, I was mostly stuck with Canon photo lenses and the occasional very old PL kit. About 6 or 7 years ago, this trend started to change, and a lot of great lenses became available. Both new ones like the DZO and the C8, and many more expensive sets from Zeiss, Cooke to Leica. And that's when I realized that I actually kind of liked my Canon lenses. In fact, the CineLens kit is still my favorite. The truth is that after a certain level, modern lenses tend to feel quite similar, and it's the older, cheaper ones that bring a more interesting look and end up being more useful as a filmmaking tool. And that's why I started to put together this weird collection of crazy old and mostly cheap lenses that I try to pull out and use in any project I'm working on. All the lenses I'm showing here work with an adapter to the Canon EF mount, which then goes into a Canon speed booster, making my Super 35 Red Komodo X feel like a full-frame camera. Just a disclaimer, the images you'll see in this video are shot specifically for this video and are not part of my commercial work. The clips were developed using the internal camera raw in DaVinci, and I did some slight tweaking here and there, but only on exposure, nothing that changes the feel of each lens. Let's start with the normal focal length. This 35mm f2.4 was produced by the Carl Zeiss Jena division in Germany during the Cold War. Carl Zeiss was based in the city of Jena, which was in East Germany, so after the war, when the Soviets came, the United States helped the company relocate part of the production to Stuttgart, which remained in West Germany. I very much enjoy the Jena, as I enjoy many other Soviet products you'll find in this list. The lens uses an M42 mount. The build quality is very high, with a sturdy metal body. The rings still work perfectly, and it's very satisfying to use. The lens looks as good as a new one. It's very sharp and has a very pleasing contrast. In fact, I use it in most of my work when I need a light setup, and most people don't even realize I'm using a vintage lens. The focus distance is quite close. The bokeh is very soft and nice, with a pronounced hexagonal shape, although not as extreme as in other cases. Also, flares are not too extreme or milky, so it's quite usable even without a matte box. Compared to other lenses, the contrast holds up well when shooting directly into the sun, while most other vintage lenses can be quite hard to control. Prices can vary between about €90 to €200 for very well kept pieces. This 37mm f2.8 lens is a weird one. It is an M42 lens like the Zeiss. It's a Soviet Union lens, apparently produced by ripping off the Carl Zeiss Flectagon. The lens is very small and it feels quite cheap and plasticky. But the bokeh has the classical Petzval swirl effect that many people look for in vintage lenses. The effect isn't as strong as with other lenses because it's an f2.8. But it's manageable, and the fact that it is a 37mm is great because the wider lens makes it more versatile. The lens is also quite sharp and doesn't have any weird aberrations. It almost feels like a modern lens. Flares are very articulate and appealing, with beautiful red and green reflections. It works very well with faces, provided that you avoid the exact area where the flares land. The best aspect is the price. Since it's not very famous, you can find it for quite cheap. I got mine for around €80. It definitely competes with the next one on my list. The most famous and widely used lens of this list, which is well known for its incredibly swirly bokeh. It's been used over and over again and has come back into trend recently thanks to recent movies like Dune and Poor Things, which use it extensively. The Helios brand was, as usual, a Soviet ripoff of the Carl Zeiss Vivitar design. It was first introduced in 1958 and kept being manufactured with worse and worse quality until the end of the Soviet Union. That's why there are so many Helios lenses out there, and you need to be careful about which version you buy. That is something I wish I'd known before getting mine, which is one of the later models, and you can tell that because it's made of very cheap plastic. The focus has some play, and the back of the lens moves back and forth when you change focus, which is something I'd never seen before in a lens. Regardless of my particular lens shortcomings, it's famous for a reason. The swirly bokeh is amazing, and combined with its macro focus capabilities, the tighter 58mm view, and the soft focus, it makes a very expressive image. If you shoot indoors, the swirl effect gets a bit lost, but you still get great character. Flares are very easy to catch, and they have a milky quality that can get out of control very quickly. But it's very pleasing on faces and skin tones. Outdoors, reflection and flares can get really messy, but quite effective if you're going for that specific style. At f2.8, the coating gives a very beautiful red reflection. If I had to buy it again, I'd go for the grey metal case version, the higher quality earlier models. It seems the lens is getting cheaper these days, so you can find a good one for about 150 euros, which is definitely a solid purchase. Lastly, among the normal swirly lens, there's the Porst 50mm f1.7. Another M42 lens, but this time a German one, and you can feel it. Porst was a German importer and producer of film cameras that housed lenses from many other brands. This one in particular appears to be made by Jena, a small manufacturer from Munich. The company went bankrupt in 2002, so there isn't much information about it anymore. But this lens is incredible. The build quality is much better, with a solid metal casing and very smooth rings. At f1.7, the bokeh is pronounced but not too extreme. It's very pleasant in the center and tends to be less concentrated towards the edges of the image. The lens is quite sharp up close, although not as much from a distance. The focus range isn't as extreme as the Helios. It's not a macro lens. The flare is very manageable and it's not too milky. It creates a series of soft, warm rings that don't wash out the image like the Helios does, and it might actually make my favorite flare among all these lenses. In this case, the coating gives it a cooler blue reflection. The Helios is definitely trendier, but the Porst is a quieter version of it, and it's a very solid and high quality option that I highly recommend. It's also a 50mm lens instead of a 58, which is easier to predict for someone like me who's used to more modern photo lenses. It is definitely the vintage lens that I use more often when I shoot commercial work. Best of all, its price is only about 60 euros, making it the cheapest lens so far. The next ones are two wide angles, the Vivitar 20mm and the 28mm. Vivitar is a Californian brand that commissioned optics from a variety of lens producers, most of which were Japanese, with some exceptions. Both my lenses were made by CROMO, which was a Californian brand operating in Japan that produced higher quality lenses for about 10 years between 1979 and 1989. The optics are very beautiful to look at and extremely well built, with solid metal casings and very smooth rings. The image quality though is quite puzzling. The image looks a bit murky, the vignette is very strong and the lens has quite a cold feeling. It's almost as if it has an integrated pro-mist filter. But there is an incredible feature about this lens. It's a macro lens, despite being a very wide angle, which makes it incredibly fun to use. It's also the lens I'm using right now to film me and making this video. When you get further away, focus becomes less precise and the lens's flows become more apparent. The last great feature is its flare, which is exceptionally beautiful. All in all, the 20mm is the better lens. It is a bit more exaggerated and a bit more fun. The 20mm costs about 130 euros, but I found the 28mm for just 30 euros in exceptional condition, so keep an eye out for them. Next is the Helios 40, which is the only tele lens I have in my kit, and it's the most surprising lens of all. Along with the 44-2, it's also one of the vintage lenses that gets used most in modern cinema, and you can clearly see why. The lens is huge. I've never seen such a wide and heavy barrel. It's made with very sturdy metal, and I kind of like that its coating is slightly radioactive, apparently made with uranium or something like that. I bought this lens from Azerbaijan, and the lens also came with 3 warm filters, which I haven't really experimented with yet. This particular lens was clearly very used and the rings are quite tough to move. It's also the only M39 lens in my kit, which requires an extra small ring to adapt it to the red. Also, the front ring doesn't seem to match any standard diameter, so I can't really attach filters to it. I have to hold them up by hand. But regardless of all these problems, this lens is amazing. The flares, the out of focus areas, the tones, everything looks and feels incredible. It feels like it's impossible to shoot anything bad with this lens. Reflections are massive, so you need to be careful where you point it to, and contrast can change wildly between slightly darker and slightly lighter areas, making it a bit of a mess to fix in color grading. But who cares when the image looks this good? And that's why the lens is the most expensive one in my kit. It set me back about 400 euros. Is it worth it? Yes, it's worth every cent. Since shooting this video, a new plugin has been released called Lens Node by NodeMill. The plugin allows you to emulate a wide range of different cinema lenses and even mix and match various aspects from different lenses together. It was promoted with Louis Potts, whose channel I highly recommend. Although I haven't had the chance to experiment with the plugin yet, I have a couple of thoughts from a potential buyer's perspective. First off, the plugin is a great option for anyone who doesn't want to commit to a specific style while filming, which might be a smart solution if you're working for a client and want to keep your options open. It is also fairly cheap, at just $129 for a year or $299 for a permanent license, which is about the price of a single vintage photo lens, and that is a sum that gets easily lost in the budget of a project. If you go this route, the best option might be to get a solid, clean, modern lens and then simply apply the qualities you like to the image. But I wouldn't recommend it from a filmmaker's perspective, especially if you're still learning. Using different lenses firsthand has its advantages, because lenses don't always behave the same way you expect them to. You have to interact with them and mediate to achieve your result. And that's much better for your personal growth than just relying on a forgiving lens. Using old gears comes with a lot of restraints, and I am a huge fan of restraints. I believe that when you have fewer options at your disposal, your work often turns out much better. Anyway, you can find the link to the plugin in the description, as well as links to all the other lenses I've talked about. Now, if you want to see how I approach editing, go ahead and watch this video about my thought process.